I want to start by saying that I am not the kind of person who scares easily, and I'm also not the kind of person who talks about stuff like this. But this happened 2 summers ago on a trip to Portugal, and I still think about it more than I probably should. I was 22 at the time, traveling with my buddy Marcus, and what started as the best vacation of my life turned into something I genuinely don't have a clean explanation for, and that's the part that bothers me most, not knowing. Marcus and I had been planning the Lisbon trip for almost a year. We're both broke in the way that young guys who worked too much and spent too carelessly are broke. So we saved up slowly and booked everything cheap. Flights, hostels, budget, everything. The one place we splurged was the last 4 nights of the trip. We found this rental in a neighborhood called Narration, which is one of the older parts of the city, up on a hill. All narrow cobblestone streets and buildings stacked on top of each other. The listing looked incredible. Tile floors, high ceilings, a little terrace out back. It was still pretty affordable by American standards, so we jumped on it. What the listing mentioned, but kind of buried in the description, was that the apartment was part of a larger property. The main house faced the street and was occupied by the owner, a guy named Duarte. Our unit was the back portion of the same building, separated by an interior courtyard and accessible through a side gate. We didn't think much of it. It was like a guest house situation, pretty common over there. Duarte met us when we arrived, and he was perfectly nice. Older guy, maybe late 50s, spoke decent English, showed us around the unit and gave us the Wi-Fi password and the gate code. The apartment was exactly like the pictures. We were genuinely happy with it. He told us he kept mostly to himself, that we'd probably hear him moving around in the mornings because the walls were old and thin, and that if we needed anything, he was just through the courtyard. He said it in a casual way, not weird, just informational. We thanked him and he left us to it. The first 2 days were perfect. We did all the tourist stuff, walked everywhere, ate too much, slept in, felt like actual human beings for the first time in months. Marcus is one of those people who becomes a completely different person on vacation, loose and easy, laughing at everything. I'm a little more wound up, but even I was relaxed. We barely spent any time in the apartment except to sleep. The 3rd day was when I first noticed it. Marcus had gone out in the morning to meet up with a girl he'd met the night before, some American studying abroad. And I stayed back because I wanted to just sit on the terrace and do nothing for a couple hours. I was out there with a coffee when I heard a door close somewhere inside the apartment. Not the front gate, not outside, inside. I sat up and listened. Nothing after that. I went inside and looked around. Everything was exactly how we left it. I told myself it was the walls, Duarte moving around on his side like he said we'd hear. I believed that for about another day. That night, Marcus came back and we went out for dinner. Came home around midnight. We were both tired, went straight to sleep. I woke up at some point, I don't know exactly what time, and I lay there in the dark, half awake, and then I heard footsteps. Not from the direction of Duarte's house, from inside our apartment. Slow, flat footsteps, like someone trying to walk quietly but not quite managing it. They moved from what sounded like the kitchen area toward the hallway and then stopped. I sat up in bed and stared at the door of my room. I didn't move for a while. The footsteps didn't come back. I woke Marcus up and told him, and he looked at me like I was being dramatic and went back to sleep. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning I walked the whole apartment looking for anything off. That was when I found the door. It was in the back of the hallway closet, behind a row of wooden hangers. A narrow door, painted there, same color as the wall almost, with a basic lever handle. It was closed, but when I pushed on it there was give. It wasn't locked. I pulled it open and it led into a short unlit passage, maybe 6 feet long, that ended at another door. That second door was locked from the other side. I stood there in that little passage and just thought about what I was looking at. I did not say anything to Marcus right then. I closed the closet, went and sat down, and tried to figure out if I was making a big deal out of nothing. I brought it up to Marcus over lunch, and he took it more seriously than I expected. We talked it through. Maybe it was just an old access point between the units. Probably decommissioned. Probably nothing. But the first door wasn't locked. Anyone who knew about that passage and had access to the other side could come through whenever they wanted. We decided we would put something in front of the closet that night. We pushed the small wooden wardrobe in the bedroom part way into the hall so it blocked the closet door. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it would at least make noise if someone tried to get through. That was the last night of our trip. We went out for a few hours, came back around 10, and I checked the wardrobe immediately. It was exactly where we put it. I felt stupid for a second, like I'd been overreacting. We packed our bags, set an early alarm, and went to bed. I was asleep fast, which surprised me. What woke me up was not a sound I can easily describe. It was somewhere between a dragging and a knock, low and short, and my eyes were open before I even fully understood I'd heard it. I looked toward the hall. In the gap under my bedroom door, I could see that the hallway light was on. We had not left the hallway light on. I shook Marcus awake and put my hand over his mouth before he could say anything and just pointed at the door. He went still instantly. We lay there listening, nothing for a long time. And then the wardrobe shifted, just a few inches, and stopped. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and we both moved to the far corner of the room without saying a word. I called the emergency number, couldn't get through clearly, hung up and called Duarte. He answered after the third ring, groggy, and I told him quietly that someone was in the apartment. There was a pause on his end that went on too long before. He said he was coming. We didn't wait. Marcus grabbed the closest thing that could work as a weapon, which turned out to be a tripod he used for photos, and we went out the front door of the apartment and through the side gate into the street. We stood out there in the dark for about 10 minutes before Duarte appeared at the main house door in a robe, walked through the courtyard and went into our unit. He was in there for maybe 3 minutes. When he came out, he said there was nobody inside. He said the wardrobe must have settled on the uneven floor. He said old buildings do that, and he looked at me when he said it, steady and calm in a way. That didn't feel like how a person acts when they've just been called out of bed to check their property. We got a hotel for the last few hours before our flight. Marcus looked it up the next day and found an old forum post from 4 years prior. Someone else who had stayed in that same unit, describing waking up to find the closet door open and items moved in the kitchen. The post had 2 responses and then nothing. When we went back to look for it the following day, it had been deleted. We don't know who deleted it. We don't know if Duarte had access to that passage. We don't know if anyone was actually in that apartment with us. What I know is that the hallway light was off when we went to bed and on when I woke up, and nobody we've ever told that detail to has had a good explanation for it. This is going to sound like the kind of story people tell around a fire when they want to feel something, but I need you to know it's not. This happened on a family trip to the Florida Keys 3 years ago, and I have 4 people who were there and would tell you the exact same thing. I was 20 at the time, the youngest of the group, and what happened that night is one of maybe 3 moments in my life where I have genuinely felt like I was about to disappear and nobody would know why. I don't mean that dramatically. I mean it as precisely as I can. There were 5 of us on that trip. Me, my older cousin Renata, her boyfriend Dev, my aunt's son Pecco, who was visiting from out of the country, and Pecco's girlfriend Yolanda. We rented a house on a canal in Key Largo for a week, which sounds expensive, but split 5 ways, it was fine. The house backed right up to the water. There was a little dock and a john boat tied to it that came with the rental. We were told we could take it out during daylight hours only. That rule seemed reasonable at the time. The first 4 days were easy and good. We cooped out, took the boat into the shallows during the day, drove down to Key West for one afternoon. Pecco was adjusting to the humidity in a way that was genuinely funny to watch, sweating constantly and complaining about it loudly in a mix of Spanish and English that made Yolanda laugh every single time. It felt like one of those trips that actually lives up to what you imagined. Those don't happen as often as you'd like. The 5th night is what this is about. We'd been drinking on the dock. Nothing excessive, just that relaxed evening in Vakin. Drinking, watching the water go dark as the sun went down. Peiko had gone inside early because he wasn't feeling well. Yolanda went in to check on him and didn't come back. That left me, Renata, and Dev out on the dock. We stayed out there talking for a while, and at some point Dev said he wanted to take the boat out. Not far, just to the mouth of the canal where it opened into the bay, he said. Renata told him it was against the rules. He said it was 11 at night and nobody would know. I should have just gone inside. We untied the boat and went slow and quiet out to where the canal met open water. It was one of those nights with almost no moon, and the water was completely flat and dark. You couldn't see more than maybe 30 feet in any direction. We cut the engine and just drifted. Dev pointed out the stars, and I'll give him that. It was genuinely beautiful. We were quiet for a while. That's when I first heard it. It was a sound coming from the mangroves to the left of us, maybe 80 or 100 feet away. At first I thought it was an animal, something large moving through the roots. Mangroves sound strange at night. They drip and pop and settle, so I wasn't immediately alarmed. But then it kept going, and it wasn't random movement anymore. It was rhythmic. Something, or someone, moving steadily through the mangroves parallel to us. Renata heard it too, because she grabbed my arm without saying anything. Dev started to say something, and I put my hand up and he stopped. The movement continued for maybe 40 seconds, and then stopped. We didn't say anything for a long time. Then from somewhere deeper in the mangroves, maybe 200 feet back, from the waterline, there was a voice. I can't tell you what it said because I couldn't make out words. It was low and one-sided, like someone on a phone call, speaking in a steady monotone. It lasted about 30 seconds and stopped. Then a second voice answered it, closer to the water, much closer than the first one. And this one I could not place at all in terms of distance. It could have been 50 feet away. It could have been 15. There was no way to tell. Dev reached for the engine cord without saying a word, and Renata grabbed his hand and shook her head. She was right. Starting the engine would tell whoever was out there exactly where we were. We were already sitting still in a dark boat on dark water with no lights on. As long as we didn't make noise, we were nearly invisible. So we just sat there. The second voice went quiet. The mangroves were still. Then something entered the water. Not jumped, not fell, entered, deliberately and almost silently. Just a soft displacement, and it began moving in our direction. Not fast, just steady. We could see the small wake it was making, coming toward us in the dark. I cannot tell you what it was. I am not going to guess. Renata made a sound I had never heard from her before. Not a scream, just a very quiet and controlled exhale, like she was trying to stay completely small. Dev reached for the engine again, and this time she didn't stop him. He pulled the cord and the engine caught first try, and we went. We didn't go slow. We went straight back up the canal as fast as that boat would move, and I was watching behind us the whole time. I didn't see anything following us. When we got back to the dock, we tied up fast and went inside without talking. Dev locked the back door and then went and locked the front door too, and I remember thinking that seemed like a completely reasonable thing to do, even though we were inside a house. In the morning, Peiko was feeling better, and we told them what happened. Yolanda asked if it could have been manatees. Dev said yes, almost too quickly, and we let it sit there. We went down to the dock after breakfast, and there was something floating at the edge of the mangroves across the canal from our house. A white plastic bag, or at least that's what I decided it was. Dev said the same thing. Renata didn't say anything. She just looked at it for a while and then went inside. We didn't take the boat out again. We didn't go on the dock after dark again. 2 days later, we drove home. I looked up incidents in that area when I got back. Nothing specific came up. There's a lot of canal in Key Largo, and a lot of mangroves, and a lot of dark water. I don't know what moves through all of it at night. I don't think I want to. I talk to strangers. I trust people easily. I genuinely like meeting people on trips, and I always have. My girlfriend B says it's my best quality and also my most dangerous one. She said that specifically after what happened in Croatia last summer, and she says it less like a compliment now than she used to. We were in Dubrovnik for 9 days, just the two of us. A delayed trip we had been putting off for years. This story starts in a restaurant on day 3, and it didn't end until we were back home. And even then, I'm not fully sure it ended. We were mid-July, warm, the city lit up below us. She leaned across and said quietly that they were watching us. And I looked over, and the man immediately smiled, and his name was Stefan. The woman with him was Marta. They were German, late 30s, very well put together in that clean European way, very friendly. We ended up talking for 2 hours. I want to be clear, about something. Nothing they said was alarming. Nothing felt off in any obvious way. Stefan was funny and easy to talk to. Marta was quieter but warm. Asked me genuine questions about her work. They had apparently been coming to Dubrovnik every summer for 4 or 5 years. They knew the city well and gave us a list of specific. We exchanged numbers so they could send us the list. It seemed nice. It seemed like exactly the kind of spontaneous thing that happens on good trips. The list arrived the next morning over text. Detailed and thoughtful, and Stefan added at the end that if we wanted to grab a drink later in the week to just let him know. B said she had a weird feeling she couldn't explain, and I told her she was being unfair to people we'd just met. She didn't push it. I should have listened. 2 days passed. We were at a beach on the Lapid Peninsula, somewhat quieter than the old city, and we were settling into our spot when I looked up and Stefan was walking toward us from the water. He waved like it was the most natural thing. He said Marta was just parking and asked if they could join us. I said yes. B said nothing. They spread out their things maybe 6 feet from us, and we talked on and off for the afternoon. And Marta had been on her phone and angled slightly so her screen was not visible to anyone. I noticed those things, and then I let myself forget her. That evening we got back to our apartment and B said she thought we were being followed. Not paranoid followed. She was specific. She said Stefan had known which beach we were going to, even though we hadn't mentioned it the night before. She was right. We had talked about going to Lapid at dinner 2 days before they showed up there, but we had said it to each other, not to them. I still can't. I texted Stefan and said something casual, that it was a nice coincidence running into them. His reply was fast. He did not address the coincidence. I sat with that for a while. The next morning, B found something. She had been looking at the photos from the trip on her phone, and in a wide shot she had taken from our restaurant table on night 3. In the background at a table near the entrance, slightly blurred but visible, were 2 people that looked like Stefan and Marta. The photo was from before they came over and introduced themselves. I zoomed in as much as I could, and I still cannot say with complete certainty it was them. But B was certain. She's a graphic designer, and she is good at looking at things carefully. We moved our last 2 nights to a different accommodation. 2 days later, I got a text from him that said simply that he hoped we were enjoying the rest of the trip, and that we should look him up if we were ever back. Normal enough. And then, 3 days after we were home, a package arrived at our apartment. No return address. Inside was a small bottle of local Croatian olive oil with a handwritten note that said we had mentioned we loved it and he thought we should have some to remember the trip. Signed Stefan Dopp. We had mentioned the olive oil at dinner on night 3, at the table where they approached us, where B's photo suggests they may have already been watching. We have never replied to that text. We have never figured out how he had our home address. B threw the olive oil away without opening it, and I didn't argue. Some people are just friendly, and some people are friendly on purpose, in a direction, towards something you can't see yet. I don't know which one Stefan was. I don't fully want to find out.